let's turn our Bibles this morning to Matthew chapter number 5. Matthew chapter number 5. Our church theme for the year is Shine Your Light. Shine your light. Keeping the first things first and making a difference for Jesus Christ. If you'd like to follow along with the sermon notes this morning, you can scan the QR code on the screen behind me or as well in your bulletin. And we'll also have the main points in the PowerPoint as we go through this morning. You know, God's expectation for us is much higher than our expectation for ourselves. Jesus Christ saved us to make us different. To make us different from the world that is around us. He saved us so that we would show that Jesus does make us different. He saved us so that we might shine the light of the glorious gospel in this ever increasingly darkening world. As we saw in the previous message of Matthew chapter number 5, there were a group of people in Jesus' day who were viewed as people who did things the right way in the eyes of God. These were religious leaders that were known as the Pharisees. But Jesus told his listeners that the level of their righteousness must exceed that even of the Pharisees. In verse number 20 of chapter 5, he said, "For I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven." The Pharisees were a very meticulous group in what they did. They were very cautious to outwardly obey the Word of God, the laws of God in outward ways that He had given them. But while they were observant on the outside, they had missed the heart of the law that God had given them. They were great at the do's and the don'ts, but they failed at the motives and the love. And Jesus told his listeners that God's standard goes far beyond the list of do's and don'ts and extends to a level that we need to be like God, as he says in verse number 48 of chapter 5. "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect." That's what God's standard is. That's what God desires of us, is to be perfect like our Father which is in heaven, to exceed the righteousness of even the Pharisees. In a previous lesson on this passage, we saw that extended even to our attitudes. The religious Jews were confident that they had kept at least one of God's laws: "Thou shalt not kill." But Jesus showed them that the righteousness that God expects from them goes beyond the physical act of taking someone's life, of murder, and it goes to the heart of it, the attitude of anger. And Jesus doesn't change our outward, it doesn't just change our outward actions. Jesus changes our inward motivations, our inward attitude. He goes to the heart. And today we're going to consider the second aspect of righteousness that God expects from us. And that has to do with our commitments. I'm sure that you've heard the phrase, "My word is my bond." And that's a phrase that goes back to at least the 1500s and was used by Shakespeare in his play The Merchant of Venice. In the 1990s, I became familiar with this phrase through different rappers that would sing it as part of their song, and it became a common part of American vocabulary. And it's a phrase that means your word is all that you need to make a legally binding contract. My word is my bond. What you say is what you will do. And obviously that is something that many people say, but that very few people actually do. All you need to do to verify that is look at any legally binding agreement that is put together by a lawyer. I mean, there's so many clauses in this thing, and it's so long, and so many lists of do's and don'ts, because people lie. People don't keep their word. Judge Marilyn Milian is famous on the People's Court, and she's famous. They're telling her litigants that are in her courtroom that they're foolish for entering into any kind of verbal contract. She said, grab the nearest piece of toilet paper and the nearest crayon and write the contract out, because people lie. Because what happens is people go into a courtroom and they said they would pay me on this date, this amount. And then she'll look over to the defendant and say, "Did you say that?" And they say, "No, I didn't say that." People lie. Almost everyone is willing to stretch the truth if it's to their personal or financial benefit. But Jesus Christ says that we as Christians should be different. We should be people of our word. We can shine our light to this world by our commitment to our Word. There are two major areas that show our commitment to this world, and that's in our marriages and in our promises. Let's consider this first area, the commitment of marriage. In wedding vows across the world, there is often some form of the statement, until death do us part. Some include phrases of being lifelong partners. Some talk about loving the other person forevermore. Others state that their commitment to the other will never fail. Even others talk about giving the spouse your life to keep. Virtually every wedding ceremony, no matter where it's happening in our world, nor the religion of the bride or groom, will include a vow of commitment. And yet we know the statistics that around 50% of all marriages end in divorce. Almost everyone makes a commitment. Almost everyone says, until death do us part. But around 50% of all marriages end in divorce. 75% of couples cite a lack of commitment. A lack of commitment as the reason for their divorce. 60% of couples cite a spouse's unfaithfulness as a reason for their union ending. And these two causes for divorce are the very things that Jesus addresses here in Matthew chapter 5, verse number 27. He says, "Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, that whosoever looks on a woman to lust after her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. It has been said, Whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causes her to commit adultery. And whosoever shall marry her that is divorced, commits adultery." Jesus Christ states that we as Christians should be different than the world around us. We are to shine our light by our commitment to marriage. The statistics show us that around 50% of all marriages end in divorce, and that's just not in the world. That's including within churches as well. 50%. The first issue that Jesus addresses here is that of infidelity. In the seventh commandment that God gave to the Israelites through Moses, He said, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." In Jesus' day, there were two beliefs among the religious Jews regarding divorce. On one side, there were those who believed that a man could divorce his wife for almost any reason he found that caused her to displease him. And while the wife, on the other hand, had no rights at all. And so if I didn't like something my wife said, I didn't like a meal that she cooked, I didn't like the way that she dressed, I could say, that's it, honey. We're done. Now, no matter what I did, she had no rights. That was the culture of the day. But then there was another group who believed that the only reason for divorce that could be given was for that of unfaithfulness, was for fornication. And here in these verses, Jesus dives in and deals with both of these issues. The first side that He deals with those that are more serious about this, that are more focused on this, that the only reason that you could get a divorce was because of adultery. And these Jews were walking around saying, we're good. You've heard said by old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. And they say, hey, we haven't done that. We've been faithful to our wives. But Jesus Christ goes more in detail with it. He dives down into the heart of the issue. And He says in verse number 28, I say unto you, that whosoever looks on a woman to lust after her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. Jesus says not doing the physical act is not righteous enough. That's not good enough. I'm dealing with the heart. God expects more from us, even going to the eye. It's not enough to just avoid the physical act of adultery. Jesus states that we have to deal with the heart issue of lust. That word look carries the idea of a repeated gazing. It's not just seeing something immoral. It's rather taking a second look at that thing. In our culture, it's very difficult to go through a day without seeing someone that's scantily clad in their clothing. I mean, YouTube ads, Facebook ads, you walk out in your neighborhood. It's very hard not to see. And so he's saying don't not just see these things, it's that second look. It's that scrolling through and you see something and you're scrolling, and you stop for a second. That's that word look. It's that taking that second look, that second observation going, oh. And Jesus says we shouldn't even look at a woman in that way. We need to be careful with our eyes. Jesus states that the person who looks at another and has a sensual thought about that person, they are committing adultery in their hearts. And this is obvious a great problem in our society. It's obvious that it's a greater problem for men than it is for women. And men are more prone to look sensually at a woman than women are to look at men. Women will look, but men are more driven by it than women. Here's statistics that I've come across. 70% of all men look at pornography. 70%. 60% of men have looked at pornography in the last month. That's an alarming statistic. 6 out of every 10 men have looked at pornography in the last month. But women aren't exempt. 40% of all women had looked at pornography in the last year. And we're just talking about videos on the internet. We're not considering that looking at that coworker or looking at that neighbor or looking at that person in the grocery store in a sensual way. The amount of times that people are committing adultery in their hearts is very scary. And it's very sobering. We're to be different. Jesus Christ calls us to be different in this world. We are not to look at a woman with lust in our hearts. We have to be radical about it. You notice what he said in verse number 29. We read, he said, if your right eye offends you, pluck it out. Pluck it out and cast it far from you. If your right hand offends you, if it's causing you to sin, cut it off. Get rid of it. Now, he's not talking in a literal fashion. What Jesus is saying, he's using this to express the seriousness with which we must deal with our sin. We must be radical in confronting our lust that is the heart of adultery. If you have a problem looking at things on a certain app, you know what you need to do? Delete that app. I don't care what the app is. I don't care how much you enjoy it. Delete the app. Be serious about this. If you have a problem about going to certain places where it's causing you to lust, stop going to that place. If you have a problem with getting on your phone and looking at things that you shouldn't look at, get rid of your phone. Only get phones that don't have internet access that you can make phone calls with. Are you serious about it? Jesus Christ says it is more important to have your heart right with God than to look at these things or to do these things. We must be serious with how we deal with sin. If you have problems looking at certain things or going certain places, get rid of it. It is better to go through life without these things than to go to hell, as he says. He said at the end of verse number 29, "In that not thy whole body should be cast into hell." And at the end of verse number 30, "And not that thy whole body should be cast into hell." We need to be serious about this. It is better to go through life without the phone and looking at things than to go to hell. The Bible tells us that all adulterers will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. The person whose life is characterized by adultery and by lust is not a saved person, is what he's saying. Now, I'm not saying that if a man or a woman is addicted to pornography that they're unsaved. But what I'm saying, and more importantly what Jesus Christ is saying, is you must consider that as a real possibility. You must consider that your righteousness must exceed that of the Pharisees. And if you love your sin more than you love God, and you hold on to your sin more than pursuing after God, you must examine your heart. You must be radical with how you deal with lust in your life. It has to be serious to you. Oh, well, everyone else is doing it. Everyone else does it. We're not to be like everyone else. We're to be different. Christians are to live at a different level. And ladies, can I encourage you something? Can I encourage you ladies to help men out? You know, the way that you dress is important. I'm guessing that most of you don't want to dress in a way that will cause other men that are not your husbands to look at you and to lust after you and commit adultery with you in their hearts. You know, men are responsible for what we look at. Don't get me wrong. Men are responsible for what we look at. But ladies, you're responsible not to be a stumbling block to other men. Men, you need to be careful. But ladies, you do as well. And men, can I encourage you to help your wives and your daughters out? Help them. They're not always aware of how wicked and depraved your heart is, of what's attractive to you. Help them out. Let them know. I don't want other men looking at my wife and committing adultery with them in their hearts. I don't want that. I don't desire that. I don't want men that look at my wife and have lustful thoughts in their hearts to her. That's for me. I'm her husband. And so what I have done through the years is if I see her wearing something and I look and I go, wow, I like that. Hey, I tell her, oh, you shouldn't wear that out. Because if I like it, someone else probably will as well. It's important. It's a serious matter. And I've talked to my wife, and ladies, listen to your husbands. Listen to them. Be sensitive to them. They're trying to help. You might not be aware of just how sinful your heart is. Men, look out for your ladies. Ladies, be sensitive to that. We need to help one another in this matter. This is a serious issue. We need to pluck our eyes out. We need to cut our hands off if it's causing a problem. And we can see through statistics that this is a serious issue in our culture. And parents, can I encourage you to help your kids out? If you're giving your kids unfettered, unfiltered access to the internet, you're being foolish. You're setting them up for trouble. You're setting them up to fall into sin. Yeah, your child might be the only one in their class that does not have a cell phone. Big deal. I'd rather my kids stay pure than to be able to look at the latest things on the internet and be made fun of by their classmates. Our standard as our family is until our kids are 16, they don't get a cell phone. They don't need it. We don't understand. If your kids need it, that's fine. But that's our standard as a family because it is more important for us, their protection. Every electronic device that they have, we have filters on them. We use an app called Custodio, and we've used it for the last 15 years. We pay about $100 a year, and it allows us to block any app that we don't want them seeing. It allows us to set timers. So at 9:30, their tablet's done. They cannot open it up. They cannot look at anything until about 7 o'clock the next morning because I don't trust them. I don't trust them to look at things. I know how sinful the heart is. I know how wicked the devil is. And I want to protect my kids. We need to be radical with how we deal with sin. It's a serious, serious problem that we're dealing with in our society. Around 20% of married people commit the physical act of adultery. Over 50% of married people look at pornography on a monthly basis. We have a very serious problem in our society and our churches. And as followers of Jesus Christ, we are to be different. We are to exceed the righteousness of even the most religious and not just deal with the physical act, but also with the heart that leads to the physical act. Let's be committed to our marriages by being faithful to our spouses with what we look at. And if you have a problem with it, seek help. Get rid of the thing. Talk to other people about it. You're not alone. You're not alone, as the statistics obviously show. And we need to be serious about this matter. A second way of being committed to our marriages is by remaining committed to them all our lives. It says in verse number 31, it has been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causes her to commit adultery. And whosoever shall marry her that is divorced, commits adultery. As I've already mentioned, one of the views of divorce during Jesus' days, and the most prominent of all the views, was that divorce was permissible for any reason. All that it required was a certificate of dismissal or a writing of divorcement. In our day and age, we call that a no-fault divorce, which is very, very popular in our day and age. And Jesus says that we are to be different than what is normal. The only reason for divorce that was given in the law of Moses was for that of fornication. And Jesus told us in another passage that Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, has suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning, it was not so. From the very beginning, God's standard was for one man and one woman to cleave together for life. That's what His standard is. And Jesus states that we must be committed to our marriage. Before Eric and I got married, we told each other that divorce would never enter our conversation. It was not an option for us. And it has never been an option for us. No matter what has happened, divorce has never been an option. We made vows to one another and to God that said something along the lines, for better or for worse. And she's got a lot more worse, and I got a lot better. For richer or poorer. Sorry, a lot poorer. In sickness and in health. We believe what God says about when people get married, they become one. One flesh. On our wedding day, we became one. I understand, I know not every marriage is perfect, like mine and Erica's. You like those brownie points I'm earning, right? I understand there's problems. You have difficulty. You have two sinners that want to do things on their own way, trying to come together, and they annoy each other. They bother each other. They snore. They leave their clothes laying around. They don't wash the dishes. They don't do things the way other people do them. Eric and I learned very quickly that my level and standard of cleanliness, what I think is clean, and hers are vastly different. And when I wash dishes, there was a little speck on it. It's all right. I mean, it's like crystal clean when she's done with it. There's levels. And there was things I did that annoyed her. But divorce was never an option. It was never ever come up in the conversation. Nothing was ever perfect. You have two sinners that are trying to get along. And it's not easy. But we're to be different. We're not even to consider this fact. But not only must we be committed to our marriages and to the promises of our marriages, but we must be committed to the promises that we make in every area of our life. Marriage is very important. And the statistics show that. But being a man or a woman of your word is also a very important fact. The commitment of promises. Look at verse number 33. It says, again, ye have heard that has been said by them of old time, thou shalt not forswear thyself, but thou shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. The rabbinic teaching of Jesus' day stated that only vows that invoked the Lord were the ones that were necessary. And they're thinking God was only a part of a vow, of a promise, if His name was invoked. They taught that all other vows could be broken without committing perjury. It's like today when people make a promise or a vow when they cross their fingers. I was just kidding. And that's kind of the idea. If they didn't invoke the name of the Lord, they were crossing their fingers. They could break it and it not be an issue. In an attempt to deceive other people, many Jews swore by heaven. They swore by Jerusalem. They swore by the temple. They swore by the altar in the temple, the veil in the temple, their own heads, and on and on. Anything but the name of the Lord. And these evasive oaths were intended to hide their lying hearts. And Jesus condemned the Jewish religious leaders for their hypocritical practice. He says in Matthew chapter number 23 and verse 16, He says, woe unto you, blind guides, which say, whosoever shall swear by the temple, it is nothing. But whosoever shall swear by the gold of the temple, he is a debtor. Ye fools and blind, for whether is greater the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold? And whosoever shall swear by the altar, it is nothing. But whosoever sweareth by the gift that is upon it, he is guilty. Ye fools and blind, for whether is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Whoso therefore shall swear by the altar swears by it, and by all things thereon. And whoso shall swear by the temple swears by it, and by him that dwells therein. And he that shall swear by heaven swears by the throne of God, and by him that sits thereon. Swearing by anything in God's domain, Jesus declared, makes it a binding contract. It's invoking the name of God. And despite what the hypocritical deceivers may have thought or wanted, God considered their oaths binding and judged them for whether they would keep them or not. And so Jesus states that we shouldn't be deceptive by our oaths or promises. We should be simple, direct, and honest. As he said in verse 37, let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay. Now that's not the song that's out nowadays, okay? Yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these comes of evil. Christians should be those people whose yes means yes and whose no means no. That should be all we need. People of integrity. People who don't need to swear complicated oaths to convince others of their truthfulness. They don't swear falsely to deceive other people. That is why Jesus declared that anything more than yea, yea, or nay, nay, yes, yes, or no, no, comes of evil. It should be noted that Jesus did not prohibit all oaths, okay? But under normal, everyday circumstances, they are more than we should need. As Christians, we should just be able to say yes, and that's enough for people, because they know we keep our word. Or we should say no, and that's enough for people, because they know we keep our word. Believers should be known as people of integrity. The believer must be the type of person that always keeps their word, and therefore no oaths are needed. There was a time in English history when honor was the highest virtue of a person, and a man who broke his word was the lowest form of a man. A common saying in the lands of the English Empire was, "It's the word of an Englishman." David Livingstone, playing off this, would write in his journals in times of crisis, he would write the verse, "Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. It is the word of a gentleman, of the most strict and sacred honor, so there's no end of it." He knew Jesus Christ kept his word. He knew Jesus Christ kept his promise, and so that was good enough for him. He knew that Jesus Christ was a man of his word. And the word of a Christian, the promise of a Christian, should be our bond. When we give our word, that should be enough. People should know that we'll keep our promises no matter how inconvenient for us, no matter the reason that might come up, no matter the problems we might have, just because we have given our word. And it would never occur to us to go back on it. If I told my kids I'm going to do something, they should know I'm going to do it. They shouldn't hope so. They shouldn't question about it. Or if I told my kids that I couldn't do something, I should be telling them the truth. It shouldn't be me just telling them that because I don't want to do it. My word should mean everything to me. I should be yes means yes, and no means no. We need to be people of our word that are committed to our word. That should be sufficient for those around us. Our righteousness must exceed that of the Pharisees. Are you committed to your promises? Or are you someone that always has to add on something? I didn't do it. I swear to you, I didn't do it. It's the most common vernacular that people will say, I swear to God, I didn't do it. Or I swear on the life of my mom, I didn't do it. I promise on the head of my child that I didn't do it. And they have to add these extra clauses because they don't have enough integrity. They haven't earned enough trust in people that their yes means yes and their no means no. I love it when my kids get to a stage in life where they say, I didn't do something, and I believe them. I can often tell with my kids that if I ask them something and they get really animated about it, and they start making all these swearing on different things that they didn't do this or did do this, they're guilty. They're trying to convince that that's not the case. I just gave away my secret. Oh, no. Our yes should mean yes. Our no should mean no. If I were to ask your employer, are you a person of integrity? Do you keep your word? What would they say about you? If I were to ask your wife, if I were to ask your kids, are you a person who, if you say you'll do something, you do it? Or if you don't do something, you don't do it. Are you a person of integrity? If you want your light to shine in our world, you can do so by your commitment. We're to be different by your commitment to your marriage and by your commitment to your promises. You know, we live in a world that's not committed to either. We live in a world that is not committed to marriage. They're not committed to being faithful to their wife. They're not committed to staying for all their life with their wife. We live in a world that tries to deceive everyone to get the best for themselves. Their word means nothing to them. If you want to be different, make it by your commitment. And people will notice. When you stop gazing at things that are sensual, when you stop dressing in a way that brings glory to your own body instead of glory to God. When you work through marriage problems instead of turning your back on your vows. When you keep your promises even at personal cost or inconvenience to yourself. This type of living is so different. It's so different than the way the world lives. That you'll shine the light of Jesus Christ. So I ask you, friends, this morning, are you a person of commitment? Are you a person that keeps your word in every area of your life? In your marriage, in your purity, and in a way that you just simply speak to people. Your yes means yes, and your no means no. You want to be different? Be a person of commitment. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word.
Thank you for joining us for part of a Sunday service at Community Baptist Church. I hope to meet you soon. May God impress His love upon your heart this week.